I still had leeks growing in the garden in late winter, so I grabbed some dried yellow peas and let them soak for some hours. It was time to enjoy this late season gift in a soup as I prepared to sow new leeks to supply me with reliable seasoning for the year to come. For all the flavor it imparts to dishes, leeks are often forgotten members of the onion family. I always recommend people try growing it and eating it. Many times you see it sad and neglected in a corner of the fresh produce aisle, having witnessed many a passerby look with bewilderment, but ultimately reaching for the onions and garlic instead. If you have never tried cooking with it before, this is your chance to do so and discover a new dimension of onion flavor and scent. It just so happens it is not as complicated to grow as many make it appear to be. At least in my opinion, leeks are very low maintenance, reliable producers that can take a bit of neglect and have a very wide harvesting window. I was harvesting the last leeks that had braved winter. They were the smallest of the group, and frankly, I had forgotten about them until the hunger gap of late February, early March sent me ravenous to find any hint of edible green in my barren, winter-raised veggie plot. The biggest and best specimens I had eaten in summer, but even small leeks are still very much usable, even if they would never pass the beauty standards of modern grocery stores. You usually only see them with their green leaves stripped off, showcasing their ghostly white stems. After the peas had spent some hours soaking, I returned to the kitchen to wash them and let them cook until tender, using a pressure cooker. I poured about double the amount of water to the amount of dried peas, drizzled some oil and curry powder, and let the peas cook under pressure for about 20 to 30 minutes under very, very low heat. I don't recommend you use a pressure cooker, however. Instead, let them simmer in a regular pan for longer until tender, stirring and adding water as needed. Unlike most beans, cooking peas in a pressure cooker can be dangerous, so I don't recommend it to those not very used with pressure cookers. Peas, especially green split peas, are famed for exploding pressure cookers by gunking up the relief valve under high heat. As I waited for the soup base to cook up, I went outside to sow leeks, but this time using a very different approach. While I always advocate the plate germination method, especially for beginners, sometimes you just want to do direct sowing. And nothing is more direct than just getting the seed and throwing it in the ground, broadcast style. I have here some leek. It's actually a flower stalk that dried up in the plant last year, and it has all these seeds attached to it. I'm going to actually grind them with my hand and throw them broadcast inside of a cold frame. I hope that it will be able to sprout faster in a controlled space, and then I can transplant it, because leek actually transplants really well. Once it's grown a bit, I'm going to transplant it to wherever it needs to grow. This way I save space, time, and I don't have to deal with all the cups and inside lights and all that jazz. So I think this is going to work. The seed head of the onion family is quite impressive in my opinion. Even dried, it has a striking shape, reminiscent of a fireworks outburst. At the end of each delicate stems sits a dried, angular, black seed enveloped in a papery husk. By simply throwing the seeds on the ground, I was mimicking their natural way of growth. In theory, the cold frame would simply hasten the germination process by increasing the temperature and moisture surrounding the seeds, provoking their seed coats to rupture as the seed swelled. I had other things growing concurrently in this cold frame, so ultimately, whatever had the most vigor would dominate. My goal was to broadcast the seed evenly to avoid clumps. Surely, not every seed would germinate. I could expect only a fraction to do so. That is the nature of broadcast seeds. Most plants overproduce seeds precisely because only a tiny fraction ends up getting a chance to grow. It is nature's insurance. Going forward a few weeks, my experiment had worked as I saw several young leeks sprouting inside the cold frame. The plate germination method is great when you don't have too many seeds to spare, such as when you buy packets from a store. However, when you collect your own seed, you usually end up with much more than you need, since nature knows true abundance. Coming up in the next block, I show how my leeks got to produce flowers and why you should let yours do it too. right after this commercial. If you enjoy the videos and would like to support the channel, you can purchase an original painting or drawing in my Etsy shop, or become a patron in my Patreon. With the base of the soup already cooked, I went about preparing the rest of the ingredients, including washing the leek thoroughly. I got about a cup of dried shiitake mushrooms and put them in a high-speed blender to turn them into a fine powder. This mushroom powder imparts great umami flavor to the soup. I covered the blender cup with a towel to contain the mushroom dust that tends to go everywhere. Once the dust settled, I made sure to not waste any of the powder. It is way too delicious to be wasted. I then dropped the leek in the cup and blended everything with some water, creating a very flavorful, chunky leek mushroom stock. I turned off the heat from the pressure cooker and opened the lid after waiting for the pressure to subside. I checked to see if the peas were cooked, and indeed they were. Now it was just a matter of finishing up the soup. I added the chunky stock to the cooked peas, turned on the heat again, and let the soup simmer so all the flavors would come together. I seasoned the soup with salt to taste. To increase the hardiness of the soup, I decided to use a taro root, so I peeled it and then cut it into cubes. Taro is a tropical starchy tuber with a delicious flavor. It also thickens soups a bit as it cooks down. It is like a more flavorful creamy potato. You can usually find it in international supermarkets. To round out the flavor, I sprinkled smoked paprika powder and stirred. I then allowed the soup to simmer for a few minutes for all the flavors to come together. To explain how I got my leeks to produce seed, I must go back to when they flowered, last summer. Leeks usually flower in their second year of growth. They're biennials, since they grow vegetatively for the first year, survive winter, and then flower in the following summer. Their flowers are a great source of nectar for pollinators, so if you want to encourage pollinators like bees and wasps to hang around your garden, make sure to allow some leeks to go to seed. Of course, the leeks you allow to flower will not produce a harvest, since you can only harvest them before they flower. I usually have a few remaining leeks I end up not harvesting, and that is how I get a few of them flowering each year. Not only are they a feast for pollinators like bumblebees, I think they're very beautiful blooms. They are rather architectural plants that serve as a natural focal point. Since each bloom is composed of hundreds of flowers, they certainly attract their fair share of beneficial insects. If you just allow them to flower freely and let the flower stalks dry naturally, you can then save the seed head for planting later. The bees and wasps will thank you, but best of all, by ensuring a continuous supply of leeks, you will always be able to access a bit of fresh and bright summer even during the dreariest of winters. My rustic leek soup had certainly perfumed the whole house, indicating it was time to enjoy it, thinking of the growing season to come. Indeed, this simple soup is very aromatic and flavorful, a hearty treat to cure the winter blues, and a down payment for the promises of a summer to come.
From where it comes, it goes in circles, sweeping porches, quenching torches, for a new day that bells a promise, sowing freedom. I'll be